My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Have you ever experienced a miracle? Is there a science behind miracles tied to a frequency of love? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Dr. Sharnael Wolverton, is a captivating multidisciplinary expert who seamlessly blends naturopathic medicine, spirituality, and quantum science to empower individuals on their journey to wholeness. As founder of True TV and author of 5 groundbreaking books, including The Science of Miracles, Dr. Sharnael offers a unique perspective on achieving optimal health and unlocking human potential. Her global influence spans 51 countries, where she shares her transformative insights through speaking engagements, online classes, and social media platforms. She also has more than 15,000 clients online with her technology of long-distance biofeedback. Her website is drsharnael.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and discoveries. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited Dr. Sharnael Wolverton. Welcome, Dr. Sharnael.
Hello, how are you today?
I am wonderful, thank you. Thank you for joining us and sharing your amazing story. I had a personal revelation in my mid-40s based upon childhood experiences. I was wired to care for others while neglecting my own health and well-being, and quite frankly, not loving myself. Your biography shares that you had a similar experience and awakening. Please share with us your path and how this lesson came to you.
Yeah, so I was in full-time ministry since 98, and I was traveling to speak at conferences anywhere from 20 people to 40,000 people in one sitting at a time, and 6 planes a week. My diet, if you call it that, at the time was terrible. I was drinking probably 6 Coca-Colas a day. Doritos, Rice Krispie bars were probably my main food group. And, you know, the airports and gas stations and what have you were not even close to what it is now. At least sometimes you can get a banana or an apple or, you know, something, a fruit of some kind or something, tea, compared to those days. But I found myself very ill. I was working about 120 hours a week and really just pushing, like you said, to the point of, you know, serving so much that it was to my sickness. And I went to several doctors trying to find answers and, you know, get this reversed and find what was going on, and wasn't really finding the answer. So I did go the naturopathic route. And, you know, one of the main things was just stress and overworking and being completely out of balance, and kind of had to reevaluate my schedule and my time and my own personal space, and, you know, carving out days off for a change. I remember my mentor at the time was saying, you know, when's the last time you had a day off? And I was just like, 19, never. And that's happened a couple times. Honestly, I hate to admit that it's happened twice. But God has a funny way of making sure we remember to remember and I use that word remember, to remember, meaning to member again, align with God again, to reconnect and realign with actually what works best with God and our body. And I was able to reverse some things and get back into my path of balance. And so that's really, really important for anyone out there, whether you're in any kind of healthcare or, you know, ministry of any kind, or even a mom or whatever. Balance is super important.
Absolutely. And the word that you used, remember, is part of the title of your best-selling book, The Science of Miracles, Remembering the Frequency of Love. What inspired that book, and what do you share with readers?
Oh gosh, the inspiration I cannot take credit for. I literally had an encounter and I was given the information and I wrote it all out in 12 hours. It took me just 12 hours to write it just because I am not the best. I have what they call dyscalculia, so I tend to see things backwards and upside down, and my typing is terrible and probably would have had it out earlier. So I was in the middle of my illness situation, and I had met a few people who were not only spiritually, pastors, or some kind of type of service, but they were also naturopaths and or MDs, and kind of was on the path of being more open up to alternative ways to get that health. It came at a time where I was really, really depressed and disappointed because I came up from a military background where the Western health care was the only thing that I knew. And so I did hit that really hard for 6 years, but all it did was get me on over 33 meds, and I still wasn't feeling any better. I had a small suitcase when I would travel of just all the medicine and the mental gymnastics of all of that. I would take this with that and don't take this with that, and have to take this in the morning and this at night, and this can't be with food, and this can't be with water, and this can't be with milk. And so I was in the thick of that. And one day I came out of my bedroom to walk into my living room, and it was almost dark. And I literally walked in, and there were these, sorry, I get emotional, very large, almost tubes of light that weren't quite tubes, but it was just light, like iridescent colors of light that looked like the form of what I knew then and could only describe as an angel or a messenger, or I don't know, it could be an alien. I have no idea. It's these beautiful, just in and out kind of hologram beings that were probably around 14 feet or more. They had a presence that was very felt, like within my soul, within my cells, within my organs. It was disrupting and shaking everything within me. And well, I say disrupting, it was probably realigning, more say. And there was a desk, a very ancient desk, and there were just piles of these ancient, really thick old books, just all over the desk, all on the floor, towering at least as tall as them, and several different piles. I mean, the room was just full of books, and I was terrified, but yet curious. And I remember feeling just so afraid and yet so much love at the same time. And I walked around to see one of them was sitting at this desk, or I went to go sit at the desk and started opening in this book. And so I went to go walk around and see what she looked more like a female. The other one looked more male-ish. And I walked around the desk and tried to kind of look to see what was in the book. And in the book were just records and records and records of names of people that were ill, that were, it showed what they were sick of. It showed what date they were healed and how they were healed. And they were healed with all kinds of natural things, essential oils, herbs, plants, very natural things. And I was just like, I was blown away. The feeling, I wish I could bottle up that feeling and let anyone feel that feeling, because the feeling is the biggest thing, my takeaway. It was just, and I still feel it every time I talk about it, to the point of tears. I was very excited and intrigued by this book. And one of them, the girl, looked at me and she said, "What do you want?" Very direct. And she didn't say it with words, it was thought. Everything was thought. And I said, I want to be a part of that. And she looked over at the other guy and she just kind of like nodded her head. And then he kind of nodded his head. And then she looked at me every single time. She pointed her finger really, really firm. She said, tell them they're not truly living unless they're living true. And when she pointed at me like that, it literally went through my entire body. I knew that it meant there were so many layers to what that meant. It wasn't just the tiny things of, white lies. It was, everything, embodying truth, living truth, walking out truth on a daily, who you hang out with, where you go to the store that day. Do you go tomorrow or the next day? Do you go to a different store or person, later? Who you're married to, your vocation, your mission, every single thing is either living true or not living true. And I saw, I started looking and understanding the chemistry of what happens to your body when you're physically living true and when you're not living true, and the integration of that and the integrity of that. And the word integrity means to be integrated fully, mind, body, spirit. And those all work together. And we tend to, in the Western world, like really put an emphasis on just one area. And there's no such thing. You cannot pee in the pool and hope it doesn't get everywhere. There's not a smoking section. Like, everything is together, related. We are even together and related. And there was just so much information that came through that transmission that I just started writing. I had formulas, I had pictures, I had mental understanding, I had physics that I didn't understand, that I had to literally go look up and go, well, what does this mean? And what does this mean? And I just wrote it all down. And yeah, she's come back to me several times now for major issues, whether it was another job move or the birth of two out of three of my kids, one miscarriage. I've had 7, but she did come for one of the miscarriages. So she's been a big part of my journey. And this book was birthed from that. My practice is actually called Living True Wellness. And so yeah, truth is my mission and living true is my mission. And that's where the book came from, is remembering love again and being aligned with God and love, who is love.
What is the science of miracles, and how do you define a miracle?
So in the formulas that were given to me, I started understanding about the biofield. And, we all have this like aura or electric belt around us, and it goes out based, like, that radiation of what goes out into the field is based on what we're thinking, what we're talking about, what we're feeling. Our DNA, our mitochondria, our organs, everything has a radiation that pushes out. And then we also have that magnet that comes in. So it's dual. That's why it's biofield, bio meaning two. The heart is actually the biggest magnet portion of what comes in, although some of the others also have that magnet. But there's a constant in and out. It's like a torrid field that's in and out, in and out, in and out. And the earth has its own collective as well. Plants have their own biofield. Animals have their own biofield. We all have that, and we're always putting something out and taking something in, and it's transferable. And I remember I'd worked cardiac rehab for a little bit, and I was in surgery watching heart operations. This is years ago, before I was doing what I'm doing. And I remember the surgeons talking about seeing the blue light in the heart. And, I just thought that was kind of interesting for a visual. But there would be a spark sometimes. And later that made more sense to me, just because of the frequency of the heart and it being 500,000 times stronger of a magnet than the other parts that are more radio kind of pushing out information. But all of the code within your field there's symbols, there's numbers, there's colors, there's all of this information, and we get what we are, and we can only get what we are. So as we clear things within our DNA, within our health, within our organs, within our mindset, within our belief systems, within our language, conscious language is very important. That sends different signals out. Therefore, we get a different match back because we bring it back in, and we're creating anyway, one way or another. We can, some people are very on purpose creating things that are positive and beautiful. And some people are just so much on autopilot. And sometimes I am too. And I try very hard to stay super conscious of everything. But we all go on default sometimes. And sometimes those defaults are the programs of, I can't do this, cancel, clear, or I'm not enough, cancel, clear, or I don't have the money, or a lack of abundance, or it could be an ancestral thing that is somehow programmed into the DNA. So you could have all the thought process and the success and the motivation, and you can even speak those things. But then if you have something in the DNA that's leaking out, radiating, then you can, kind of have that 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situation where you're like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get out of this weird program or pattern? And so I work with people to clear anything that would be the negative equations. What in biofeedback, I listen to speech. I usually can identify within 4 or 5 minutes where the snag is, just in body language and conscious language. When we can clear those things, people start getting different results. And then even with the physical, sometimes it's a physical issue like parasites. If you have physical parasites, that sends a radiation out that person could be a good host. And so it sends out a signal, that person's a good host, and meaning a good victim. And so people who are predators will only submit to your lowest common equation, whether they mean to do it or they don't. Some of them are very on purpose and know what they're doing. And some people, it's just an accident, but they do it because it's the code. And so these are the things that were given to me, and it's all in the book and explains it a lot better than I can in a few minutes for sure. There's many chapters about bilocation and changing timelines and ways to clear. And I hope that answers your question.
I'd like to follow up on something that you said. You talked about the organs being transmitters, but the heart as a very powerful magnet. If the heart is a powerful magnet, it pulls in what you aspire to, or can pull in something that you just don't want in your life, right?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is a lot of people can really, really want something and be very focused on wanting something, and yet the equations that maybe they don't know, or there's some sort of subconscious programming, or maybe some trauma or whatever, can take away from that equation and cause, a 1 + 2 + 3 - 4 + 7 - 6, and it's just this big equation of, not really getting to where you want to be. And that's why it's so important, again, to identify what these things are in the field. Like, what is your actual subconscious saying? And what are you putting out? What is a person putting out that may be causing some energetic purgatory? Because I am not a fan. I do not like we having to take lessons over and over. I've had to do it, believe me, and sometimes I still do it, and yet it's not fun. And you'll keep going round and round because it's a gift. It's God in you saying, hey, there's still something here. And let's clear that. Let's realign. Let's remember the frequency of love, and let's radiate that. And when we do, and it's pure and it's out there, then we start getting things back that we actually are our highest and are our purest. And I mean, this book is used in homeschools. I wrote it on a very elementary level on purpose so kids can even practice. My children have practiced. They have found, remembered lost things that have like magically come in a portal on their bed, on my bed. I have, like I said, I've bilocated without even trying. I've done the strangest things that have happened just by applying these formulas and practicing these formulas and clearing and clearing and clearing. And it's just been quite a journey.
I'm going to share with you what I consider to be one of the miracles that occurred in my life, and talk a little bit about the energy behind this. In 1975, I was in the Air Force, and I was stationed in Korea. And I had sustained a little bit of an injury during an intramural football game, Army versus Air Force, where a gentleman tackled me headfirst in my back, and I was in quite a bit of pain. And a friend of mine at the time suggested that I have an acupuncture treatment. Now, I heard the word acupuncture before. I was familiar with the word, but I'd never experienced it. And so I sought out and found a Korean acupuncturist and had a treatment done. And the pain in my back subsided very quickly, and I was grateful for that. What I did not know was that acupuncturists in Korea in those days did not use disposable needles. They did not sterilize their needles that well. And hepatitis B was endemic, which means many people carried it but didn't manifest the disease. So 2 weeks after this wonderful acupuncture treatment that I had, I woke up one morning, I wasn't feeling right, and I looked in the mirror and my eyes were beginning to turn yellow. And I said, uh-oh, something's wrong. And I went to the military hospital and they looked at me and said, you have hepatitis. And they admitted me right away and they treated me differently than they were treating everyone else who was being treated for hepatitis. And the doctor came to me one day and said, do you have a will? And I said, no. He said, well, we're going to have the Judge Advocate General's office send somebody over to do a will for you to protect your family. I said, why? He says, well, you're very, very sick, and we want to make sure that if you pass, everything's in place. And I sort of shrugged it off, but he did it anyway. And in any event, one evening I was sitting there in the bed, and I had this voice in my head, which I had heard since childhood, tell me to ask the doctor for a picture of a healthy liver. And I did. The doctor had come in for rounds and the next day, and I said, do you have something that shows a picture of a healthy liver? And he said, why? I said, I just want to look at something that shows a picture of a healthy liver. And he sort of shrugged, and he brought me an anatomy book and opened it to the page with a picture of the liver, and I started studying this. And about a half an hour later, the voice said, put the book down and place your palms over your abdomen. And I did. And I started feeling this wonderful, tingling, warm sensation. I don't remember how long it lasted, but at some point I fell asleep. The next morning at 5 a.m., the nurse woke me up. She apologized. She said, I have to take your blood. 2 hours later, she came back and she said, the laboratory messed up your blood samples. We have to take another draw. An hour later, the doctor came in and said, after I gave you the book last night, what did you do? And I told him. He said, you're crazy. And I said, why? He said, last night your liver enzymes were so high, we didn't expect you to survive. This morning, they're almost normal. We've never seen anything like this before. So a couple of things come out of this. Number one, the fact that I had this connection to spirit where this information would come to me. And number two, that I trusted the process and felt that I deserved the process, did this healing process, and consequently healed from it. Now, you would think that would have been my aha moment, but I still wasn't ready until my late 30s and early 40s to engage in that. But that for me was a miracle.
That is a miracle. That's exactly a miracle. And what do you attribute? Like, were you praying? Were other people praying? Like, what was going on that you can contribute? Like, why do you think this happened?
I think one of the things that I always projected was that I had a purpose in this life and that I didn't know exactly what that purpose might be, but that purpose was involving helping other people at some point. And I
Yes.
think that message was coming out of me and consequently coming back to me.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I love that. I had something similar happen in elementary school where they told me that I would never hear again. I was losing my hearing and I was also having trouble speaking and constantly have strep throat, and they were going to take my tonsils out, which isn't necessarily the, life threatening. But as a kid, they were going to go in and put tubes in my ears and do some other things with my ears, and then also take my tonsils out at the same time. And I was just terrified. I remember I was in bunk beds at the time. I was on the lower bunk, and I literally just prayed all night long. And I mean, and my parents didn't go to church. I didn't grow up in any kind of religion. But I had an encounter at 4 with Jesus, and I just knew to pray to Jesus. And so I prayed, and, he is my teacher. I know there's lots of great teachers out there, and I prayed and prayed and prayed. And similar thing, I went to go to surgery that morning. I got up, we went to the room that I was supposed to go in for pre-op. And I was sitting outside with my mom, and some other little kid was in there, and they were doing whatever they were doing to her or him. And they were screaming bloody murder. And I was just terrified. I was just like even more afraid. And so my mom asked the nurse if we could go sit in another room. Said, hey, let's hearing test. We're just going to do one more, whatever. And just to get me out of that space and not to be so terrified. And so they brought me into one of those sound rooms where they do the hearing test. I put on my little earphone things, and everything came back perfect. And she was like, what? So the doctor came in. They did it like 3 times, and they checked my throat. My throat was completely clear, and they canceled the surgery. And I've not had any ear problems or strep throat ever since. And like, what's, similar? I was literally learning sign language. I had sign language books. I had sign language posters all over my room because they were saying, that I was going to go deaf, cancel clear. So, pretty interesting.
Wonderful. My guest, Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sihan. Please share with our listeners where they can find out more about you, your website, and your books.
Yes, sir. I'm at drsharnael.com. It's Dr. Sharnael is SHARNAEL.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I do have a podcast every Thursday at noon on YouTube and Spotify and all that. It's called Dr. Sharnael True TV. I would love to connect with you guys who are listening. If any of you guys have any more questions, or if you're interested in anything, we have books and different resources on the website, workshops, and lots of fun things, and a great newsletter. So I'd love to connect with you guys.
And we'll be back with more of Dr. Sharnael after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sihan. We're talking about the science of miracles. Dr. Sharnael, Carl Jung defined synchronicities as meaningful coincidences without causal connection. I've experienced many of these in my life. What is your understanding of these, and how may we recognize them?
Wow. Yeah, that is such a beautiful question. I love synchronicities, or I call them signs. I love scripture on a quantum physics level, and look at scriptures. And one of the scriptures says, signs follow those who believe. And I was giving that understanding because I live, and we should all live in a world of constant signs, of just giving a little nudge here, a little voice here, a little synchronicity, whatever you want to call it. And living by those nudges, living by those God winks, or living by those, opportunities that, all of a sudden you just happen to have this thing happen or this thing happen. they are not coincidences. They are synchronicities, but it's a synchronicity of the code. It's a synchronicity of your alignment with the frequency of love. And it's about the field. You only get what you are. And when you start seeing signs that are either giving you confirmation about your path and or giving you some sort of encouragement or courage to stay on the path or whatever, or maybe you go a whole different direction, that is an alignment of equations where you're literally starting to rise in frequency and consciousness, clear out more, and then get more kind and loving feedback, literally, from that magnet that comes back in. You are the one creating it. We are the one creating it. And, that's why this work is so important. And I'll give you an example. When I was in full-time ministry within churches and within different organizations that were more religious, I had kept getting these dreams or nudges to maybe, just those little voices like, maybe you should go back to school and be a naturopath, which was completely out of the box for me, like absolutely like foreign to any upbringing or programming that I had. And I was just introduced to it over and over, like with just this person came in my life who was a minister and a naturopath. And this person came into my life that was an MD and a naturopath. And, I was so craving the information because I wanted to help people so bad. And I was very passionate about not letting a single in the position that I was in at that time and allowing people to have better belief systems and choices to do different things. And so I was literally on the tarmac on a plane, 37 years old, 3 kids under 8 or under 7. And I just, in my mind said, God, do you really want me to be an ND? And I look out the window and there's these cones and different things, where you haven't taken lift off yet. And there was this like yellow kind of flipboard stand thing that they have to give direction to the plane. And it said ND that away. And it was pointing in the direction that I was going. And I was like, okay, God. And so, Monday when I got back, I was looking for schools to find out how to get my doctorate. I'd already had my undergraduate in ministry, and I'd always thought I would be a doctor in divinity or theology or something along that line, because I was just really obsessed with understanding all those things. And here I took a total different direction, but it took lots of synchronicities to bring me to that equation. And because I'm a person who's like, can I have another confirmation? Can I have another confirmation? Can I have another confirmation? And so if that's what you choose, then that's what goes out, and then you get more matches, and then you're more confident. I was more confident in my choices. And so we all have a life of miracles. And that, again, is to me part of a miracle. And miracles aren't just like big, huge things to me. Miracles are little things too. Like and some things that don't look like miracles are absolutely miracles. And you brought it to yourself for a reason. And the reverse engineering of some of those things can be awesome. And also sometimes it's the timeline where it's like, okay, you're doing all these things. It doesn't feel good. You're supposed to, you don't know why, but you're just convinced. And then like 9 months later, you're like, oh, now I know I was there because this happened and that happened. And now that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't at that thing, And so those are miracles too. But sometimes the left brain is just like, what am I doing here? Why am I with this? It's like, what? And sometimes they're more fun, like this with me and you right now. Like meeting you to me is a miracle, and it's something I needed. And our pre-discussion, I literally felt like I just got healed. And so anyway, yeah, synchronicities are our inheritance. They're in our DNA. This is what we're born for, love and creating more love.
I have found that every time I've been presented with a synchronicity, I have 3 choices. I can either dismiss it out of hand, say yes, but not right now, perhaps later, or yes with a big capital Y. And every time the ones came with the big capital Y, the next one would come and the next one would come. And it's just an awareness of the fact that this energy is there, this loving energy that's given to us to move forward in our lives and fulfill the purpose that we've chosen to be here for.
Absolutely. And I can give you scripture for that. And again, I'm not a theologian by any means. All of that is quantum physics, but seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you. So where is the kingdom? Who is the kingdom? That's the kingdom is within. And when we do those little hints that are, we follow that first, then all these things will be added unto us. And in my book, I talk about this, and I also talk about what you just said. I had the envisioning of a Kleenex box. And what I tell my clients when I work with them is think with the first 3 things that you got to do, but you haven't done for some reason. Just go do them right now. Get them done today. And usually that will just unpack so many different things of just getting those things wiped off your list. And I see it as pulling up a Kleenex, and then guess what? The next Kleenex comes up, and then you pull that Kleenex, and the next Kleenex comes out. And we don't know what's at the bottom of the Kleenex, but it's the courage to step out and take that first Kleenex out of the box. And, a lot of times we think, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what's the purpose of this? And the teacher in me wants to know the end. I am very organized, and I want to know why. And it's like, sometimes we don't always have to know why yet. It's just the obedience of taking that first Kleenex.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because during the break between the 2 segments, I had to run out and get a new box of Kleenex because I've got a little bit of a nose thing.
What?
Absolutely.
What?
That is so funny.
That is so funny. See, you're in sync. We're in sync.
There you go. Talking about the frequency of love, how may those who are not certain about that find and attune to the frequency of love?
Great question. There are all different ways. I use a lot of natural things. I have what I call the lightning lavender process or lavender lightning process of using a lot of natural things, using a lot of electronics, whether it's biofeedback, PEMF, hyperbaric chamber, lasers, red light therapy. There's biofeedback. There's so many different things electronically that can help serve us to get back into alignment physically. And then there's also the consciousness of just looking at, what are we saying? What are we thinking? What are our belief systems? Because what we believe, we are. We are the word belief, to be alive in something. And when we are alive in something, that will leak into the radiation of our field, and whatever's in the field is what we get. So, that constant cleaning, meaning, eating really good food, making sure we don't have parasites or Lyme or fungus, on the physical, on 3D, there's physical things to do. But then on the mental, things like taking time for space, meditations, things like Reiki, or, we do raindrop therapy, or grounding, reading, hanging out with people that are maybe in a different place than you, just having diversity and learning from other people. And I mean, literally, they do say that you are just like the most, the 5 people you hang around with most. Why is that? Well, number 1, we create those people to come in our lives. And number 2, there is a transfer within the field. And so, think about a house in the middle of a subdivision. You could have mansions all around you, and you could have a 1,500 square foot house right in the middle of it. Your equity goes up when you are around those houses. And so I say, if you are having negative things going on in your life, find new friends. Find friends that are more positive and that speak conscious language, and get into a new group of people. Find new people that can maybe bring that frequency and equations to a new level, literally. And that affects abundance. That affects partnership. That affects business. That affects your children. everything is all together. Everything is connected.
One of the questions that commonly comes up when I'm doing spiritual coaching or counseling is, can I find my soulmate? Can I find my divine partner? How many people find their divine partnerships?
That's hilarious. I have a really big story on that. That literally takes, I should write a book. But so I was in a relationship with a boy in high school, and we were together high school and college, and then we took a little recess. It wasn't a fun recess. It was a dumb recess. And then instead of having that recess, I ended up marrying another person who wasn't so great, and had a lot of things to learn through that relationship. And then that didn't last finally, and actually had another marriage that felt like I was just graduating from like worst people to worst people. And when I got ill, I really started looking into like, what is the genesis of patterns of just bringing in the worst people. And I consider myself extremely loyal and very integrity, like high integrity of being on time and really early, and just doing what is right to, what I agree to, and following agreements. And so when those things were not coming back to me, it didn't make sense to me, because I'm like, what's happening here? I'm doing all these right things and living true, and yet I was attracting liars and cheaters and abusers. And so I started working with this guy named Bob Tennyson Stevens, who is now passed. Actually, his anniversary for his passing is coming up here, and he was mentoring me for years. And he asked me one day, he literally, I'm going to just tell you what he said. He said, "Was your dad a prick?" That's what he told me, just saying his words. And I said, "No, my dad's amazing. We have a great relationship." And so he kept asking me, like, where is the genesis of, have you ever picked a good one? Because he said, it seems like your picker is broken. And, I've only had like 5 guys that were long-term, and 2 of them were marriages. So I kind of went back to the path, and then I got back to this guy in high school. And I said, he said, "Okay, well, you had one good one. What happened?" And I said, "Well, we just had this thing that happened one night, and most of it was my fault. And I said a bunch of dumb things, and we had a break, and then it turned into not a break." And he was like, "Go back and find the guy and apologize and get that cleared, and then you're going to have a different trajectory." Well, at the time they were telling me I had weeks to live physically. And so I wasn't going to find this guy to get back with him. I was going to just clear that before I died, so it wasn't on my conscience. And I had tried to find him a few times over a long time, trying to clear that. And anyway, long story short, wasn't able to get him to respond to me. I did find him. I sent him a message. His response was, "What?" And I said, "Can I just have 15 minutes of your time? I don't know where you live. I will travel to you. I will fly to you. I just need 15 minutes. It's very important. It's time sensitive." And he didn't respond. So I went back to my mentor and I said, "What do I do if he won't talk to me?" And he said, "What do you mean talk to you?" And I said, I reached out. I've talked to his brothers. I've done everything. What do I do to fix this? And he was like, "Honey, everything is energy. What are you talking about talking to him? Like, just energetically talk to him." And I was like, "What?" Could not figure that out. So he explains, just walk around the block or something, take a walk and just talk to him as if he was, right there. So I did. 11 o'clock at night, I walked around, said the things I needed to say, asked for forgiveness, told him I was sorry. The dumb things I said, I didn't mean, blah, blah, blah. Laid on the driveway, looked up at the stars, and I said, "Okay, God, thank you for clearing that. Thank you for fixing it. Thank you that this is done." And literally, I'm not kidding you, Victor, my phone rang. It was like 11 o'clock at night. It was sitting next to my head on the concrete in the driveway in the middle of the night. And my phone rang, and it was Brian. And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Okay, I'll meet with you." I was like, "What?" So I meet with him. that's a whole long story. But what's interesting is later when I got the cleared, I did get a clear on my health condition at the time, and they were doing muscle testing, and I had had 3 dreams in a row to take the ring off. I had been separated from my husband because he left as soon as like a month after my cancer diagnosis. And I had still wore the ring because I'm a stickler to rules. And on paper, I was married to this guy, and I'm not going to live a lie, right? So 3 nights in a row, I kept hearing, take the ring off, take the ring off. I'm like, what? And so I asked my doctor, who was doing all this muscle testing, when he left the room, I said, can you test other things besides medical? Can you test if I could take this ring off? And she was like, sure. What do you want me to do? I said, just, can you say, is it okay for me to take the ring off? And it came back, yes. And then all of a sudden I come to me and I thought, can you ask if I'm still married to this guy? And it came back, no. And I was like, oh my God. I said, can you ask if I was ever married to this guy? It came back, no. And I said, can you ask if I'm married? It came back, yes. I'm like, please tell me I'm not married to the first guy. And she tested me, no. Was I ever married to the first guy? No. And I am like having a meltdown at this point because I'm like, this is years of my life, like 21 years, just not being married, but being married. And I'm crying, I'm upset. And I'm like, well, who am I married to? Like, when did I get married? And they came back and tested. It was November 7th, 1987. That meant absolutely zero to me at the time. And 2 days ago, actually. And I shelved it. Later, much later, after I was very, very clear, my Brian contacted me and asked me if I would meet with him for dinner and that he wanted to cook for me. And I went to his house, and he had this big football bag, every letter I've ever written to him, every song I ever sang, every matching shirts, we had a Ms. Paul necklace, like cassette tapes we sent to each. I mean, he had kept everything, pictures of him and my grandparents and me and Sadie Hawkins and proms and, all the things all over. He kept it all. And there was this calendar that came out that was a 3-year calendar, and it showed both of our birthdays, September 14th, and his is January 2nd. And then November 6th was circled on all 3 years, 87, 88, 89. And I said, what is this? And he said, you don't remember? And I was like, no. And he said, well, you came to my football game and you put your picture and your phone number on my truck that night. And I called you. And then the next night we went on our first date, November 7th. And I was like, what? And I literally was like, oh my God, I'm married to Brian. And like that blew my mind because of the legalities and the paper and the 3D. And like later I had him tested. He had never been married. He was physically married twice as well, at the same time, in the same month, in the same year. We had children at the same time, parallel from each other. And yet he had never been married to those two people either, only married to me on November 7th. And he didn't even know that he was married or that I was testing for that. It was a blind study test, which led me to believe, like, what in the world is marriage, number one? And number two, it made sense of why I was getting all these liars and cheaters, because technically on a subconscious level, I was married to Brian. I was the cheater. I was the liar. I was creating liars and cheaters to come to me.
Wow. Amazing. My guest is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sihan. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sihan. Dr. Sharnael, what role does consciousness play in shaping our reality?
Oh, wow. You got like 2 hours. In a nutshell, the higher your consciousness, the bigger your field. David Hawkins has a book called Truth in Force that has a map on there about what he's tested as far as frequency for people's consciousness. And it starts at 0, goes to 1,000. Jesus is 1,000. There's a lot of there's actually the only person I've ever that's been tested at 1,000 besides Jesus is Mary Magdalene, which is interesting. They're divine twin flames. So, whether, whatever, people may not believe that or not, or whatever, but technology, I'm a geek. I look at stats and that's what has come back. 100, for example, is addictions. 25 is death. 50 is when you start getting sick, and more manipulation, control, things like that. Anything over 100, there's a lot of people who never even get to 200 on the planet. I forget the percentages, but there's not a lot of people in 200 or above. That's the wake up time. But the 500 is love. And we can go into all the different people I've tested and where they're at. One day, maybe we'll do another one. But what I found is when you have a lower consciousness, you have a smaller field. And I've actually tested people who are like 25 or 50 or below with that. And their field, that biofield that I was talking about, that it's only like an inch or two, or sometimes it's actually non-existent or inverted. But when you have a higher consciousness, like 300 and above or 500, which we can go into that another time, your biofield will grow. And the average person is about 3 to 4 feet, sometimes 5 feet. But I have tested people up to 20 feet out in range. And my understanding of that is that when you have a low consciousness, God, source, creator doesn't want you to have influence. So they cannot generate their own field. They cannot create to the level that someone with a higher consciousness can. Now they'll create, but they'll create negative things, and usually on purpose and with gutso and confidence. And it's not good for someone to have power that has that lower consciousness. And so, a matter of fact, they will mooch off or take from other people's field because they can't generate their own, and they need that for life, for sustenance. And so they'll steal. And plants do this willingly and sometimes not willingly. There's some plants that will literally kill other plants to stay alive. And dogs, animals, it's life. It's what's going on Earth in general. But the more, the less consciousness that you have, the more these type people will rely on other things for social engineering, like Project Mockingbird, or using celebrities or media to create this other narrative, because they literally could not speak where anyone will hear them or understand them or follow them, because it's heard, it's felt. Authenticity is felt, and people who are awake can identify when something's true in their voice and in their action. But someone on the opposite will have a much larger field, and they can change things just by walking in their room. You, sir, Victor, you have a very high frequency. You have a very big biofield. You don't have to do much. You could stand in a room and you can heal people. Like, you did it to me before we got on the show. Like, there's something really high consciousness with you that is tangible. And I felt it the minute that we started talking. And so you're an anomaly, and there's only a few that are above even 200, but I would guess you're around the 450 mark, maybe 500. And so therefore you have influence without even saying things. You just walk into a room and people feel you and start crying, like I did. And that's how I know when I've met someone who's of the light and of love and is in alignment with frequency of love. So if that helps, I'd love to sometimes share with you some of the people that I know are even higher than 500, or people who have passed, like Joan of Arc with 700, and some of these other people that they killed that were really high in consciousness, but they considered them witches or, killed them off and out of fear. The lower energies didn't want them around. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I will share that I think I have met my sister today, because I look into your eyes and I see my sister, and I'm grateful that we've had this opportunity to meet. My guest, Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sihan. Dr. Sharnael, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your amazing work.
Yes, sir. So I have 5 books, a lot of great online workshops. I do consultations and counseling. I can do conscious language and outcome mapping and biofeedback remote. Dr. Sharnael is DrSharnael, like Israel, Sharnael.com. And again, I'm on YouTube. I have a podcast there. We have a lot of fun guests. Actually, I'd love to have you as a guest. And, we talk about consciousness and fun things and timelines and frequency hopping and, just all kinds of health things. And yeah, you would fit right in with that. And, but yeah, I would love for you guys who are listening, if you have any questions, find me somewhere. I love radio. But I really love seeing people's faces and their field and just connecting. So if you want to reach out, just reach out to me, and I'd love to say hi and send you good vibes.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of this wonderful wisdom.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's a privilege and an honor.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.